Okay, this is a demonstration of how to draw the shadow of a sphere. And just like when we were doing the reflection of the sphere, you need the cube that the sphere sits in order to know where it is, because you can't tell where it's located otherwise. So I have the cube. I've made a 4x4 cube so that it would be big enough that you could see what I'm doing. You can, and I made it up close. You can put it wherever you want, obviously. Um, so the basic idea here is something like this: that we have a sphere, and the light's coming on it from this direction over here. I guess I should have moved my light to match up with it. But anyway, light's coming from here, which is what these orange rays are. And there's a disc here that I've drawn in blue that cuts through the middle of the sphere that is casting the shadow. So we're not going to worry about this up here. We're not going to worry about that over there. We're not going to worry about any of this. We're just going to try and cast the shadow of that sphere. So that looks sort of like this. We're going to try and figure out where that sphere would be that sits in there like that. And then we're going to cast the shadow from it. And so we have to find that shape. But then the other thing we have to do is we have to figure out where the point on the ground directly below this is. So I'm going to show you how to do that. But kind of keep these ideas in mind, that we're basically casting the shadow of this blue disc here that goes through the middle of the circle. And I've set it at 45 degrees, like in this diagram. You wouldn't have to do it at 45 degrees, but it's easy because then you can just use these two corners and you know that's 45 degrees. You could put it at whatever you wanted it to be, but then you'd have to be measuring it in order to transfer it into your drawing. But that's not a big deal either. So here we go. So I have my cube. I drew a plane here through the middle of the cube. Basically a plane that's slicing through the middle of my sphere. And I drew it in orange because I only need it briefly and I don't want to confuse it with anything else. And so I made it orange, so nothing else will be orange, and orange is kind of easy to ignore. So that's that. So you divide your sphere in half this way with a plane cutting through it like that, and then construct an ellipse in that plane. And I've got it there. It's very light, but I don't want to have to look at it afterwards because there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. So the first thing we have to do is we have to find that blue plane, that blue disc that's casting the shadow. And so if I say it's at 45 degrees, I know 45 degrees, where 45 degrees is here and there and there. And so I will draw those. And just an interesting little tidbit, I'm always telling you that all lines that are parallel in real life vanish to the same vanishing point in perspective. That's true even when they're not parallel to the grid. So these three lines here would vanish to the same point. Now it's going to be way over there across the room. It's also not going to be on the horizon line because it's not parallel to the ground. If anything parallel to the ground is going to vanish to something on the horizon line, but these are sloping up. So they're going to have their own vanishing point somewhere way up high. So anytime you end up drawing something that's not parallel to the grid, all you have to do is get those first couple lines figured out, and then you've got vanishing points that you can use to draw the rest of it. All right, so there's the diagonal line there, make it a little darker, that shows where where the plane is that the blue disc sits in. But we need to find the extent of the blue disc. Well, the blue disc intersects intersects the ellipse at 45 degrees here. I mean, the plane that it's on intersects the grid, the disc. Wait a minute, start that again. The disc intersects the orange plane right here. So I can take that line there, go to my vanishing point, and go from over here to over here, from this side of the box to this side of the box, figuring out where that intersects the ellipse. And then I do the same thing down here. It intersects the diagonal right here. So I'm going to draw. So there's the plane that my disc sits in. And then all I have to do is draw the sort of elliptical looking disc. Now the disc isn't going to be an ellipse anymore because now it's been distorted in two directions. It's been distorted by tipping it this way. It's also been distorted because it's vanishing back that way. So it's not going to actually be an ellipse, but we're going to treat it as an ellipse. We're going to construct it the same way. So here's, wait a minute, is that the touch point? Yeah. So there's two touch points, and there's two touch points. Now we could do the 12-point method in here. I'm not going to just because it takes so long. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to sketch in something here. It's going to go from this touch point to this touch point to this touch point to this touch point. And I'm going to sketch in something that seems like it's transitioning smoothly from one. Maybe I really should do the 12-point. I don't want to. I can't do the thing of folding it along its axes. It doesn't have any axes because it's distorted. Because this part is getting farther away and this part is getting farther away. But you can still sort of look at it and say, well, does it look like the transitions are pretty consistent, that the curves, the rate of curve is pretty smooth? Still looks like it needs to be bigger here. So you want to try and focus your eyes on it or blur your eyes on it a little bit or something and have it look like it's a circle that's vanishing sort of at a slant. You know, try and picture that plane and the circle on that plane. And I think this part over here is wrong. Yeah, so I'm going to erase some of that. You may have noticed that we started out the semester really obsessively precise. And it took a while for you guys to kind of all get in the habit of being so obsessively precise. And now all that precision is sort of giving way to what looks right. But that's just the nature of it. It's kind of a combination of a little bit of art and science or math and magic or something, because there's some ideas behind it that you can figure out, but complexity is too much to really be precise with. So I'm going to keep kind of focusing down this line till I'm comfortable with it, and I want it to be a single line, because this line, the reason I'm making it blue, in case you hadn't guessed, is because that's going to be where all of our angle of light information is coming from. And so I'm making it blue, and so I want it to be as sort of specific a line as possible. I don't want it to be ambiguous about where it is. I recommend when you do it, you do the 12 point. Because it's pretty hard to guess how much it comes out this way. Well, let's assume this is perfect. Okay. So that's our blue information, our angle of light information. And we're still using the reverse sun. We still have the reverse sun here, the shadow vanishing point here. There's our blue. So now we need our red. And the red is going to be, if we take on the 45 here, if we take the limit of the blue, this is where the blue disk, the maximum extent of the blue disk is here. So here's the maximum extent of the blue disk out here. And over here. So now we're going to take this red rectangular shape, diamond shape, I guess. And we're going to do the same thing. Maybe I'll do the 12-point method here just for the sake of being a little more precise. So the touch points are here, 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 and here. And then if I make an X, I'll use another color here. This is the time to break out that box of very thin pencils, because if ever you needed a bunch of different colors to differentiate things, now's the time. So there's the middle. So I need a line across the red circle. I just lost it there for a minute, couldn't see it. And if it hasn't happened to you already, I don't believe it, but also it's going to happen to you doing this. So now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to draw the green grid for the 12-point method without having my, well, in this direction I have the grid, so I can just use the grid. Because this thing has been distorted this way, but it hasn't been distorted this way. Okay. So here's my first perimeter bar. I'm going to go from here to here. I'm only going to mark this first crossing where this line crosses the first line on the green grid, because I'm not going to draw the whole X, because then I have way too many lines. I'm going to just go from the corner to this corner, but I'm only going to draw where it crosses the green. So from here to here, and it crosses the green there. And from here to here, crosses the green there. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's my 12 points. So this is going to be a red ellipse-like thing. Again, it's not an ellipse, it's been distorted to many directions. It's more of a sort of lozenge shape. There's an expression they use in landscaping called the drip line. So if a tree is 50 feet wide, its drip line is at 50 feet. It's where those outside drops hit the ground. So I think of this red as being sort of the drip line of this blue disc. Again, once you're happy with the line, you want to try and make it as kind of crisp as you can so that it's not ambiguous when you're using the information for the shadows. Okay. So then we're ready to go. So it's the same thing, the angle of light and the direction of light. I'm going to start by casting at this top point here, just because it'll kind of give me the highest, and then I'll probably do these other touch points to get an idea of what the overall shape is, and then start looking for more information where I need it. So I'm going to go from here to the reverse sun. I'm going to use a blue line so I can tell the difference between things. And then I'm going to go from the point on the ground directly below it. Oh, I know, there was one last thing I should have done before I started. I think I wonder if I'm right. I was thinking in the middle of the night that maybe this needs to line up with that. I wish I had drawn a 12 point up here. When you do it, do both. And then tell me, does it line up? Does the top blue disc line up with the red shape, the red lozenge, if you use the 12 point on both? Or maybe I'll figure it out afterwards and tell you. Okay, so I'm going to go from here. I went from here to here. Now I'm going to go from here, the point on the ground directly below it, to the shadow vanishing point, which is up here. And where they intersect, there's that line right there, is right there. So that's the shadow of that point right there. If this were Mike Pence's head and that were up the fly, that would be its shadow. And now I'm going to do this one. I'm going to go from here to the reverse sun. And the point on the ground directly below it, which is there, to the shadow vanishing point, and they intersect right there. And one thing that's really important is when you're casting the shadows from these casting edges here, you have to be using the distance, the direction of light information from here. Once you start casting from this part of the disc, you need to be using the front part of the lozenge. So make sure you're clear. Like anything from this point over, they get paired up like that. And again, you can just draw a vertical line to connect the points. And anything out here that you need to cast, you cast using these lines here. And again, you can just draw a vertical line to match them up. So there's a point. So now we're going to go from this, the touch point here on the side. So that's the widest place. And from the point on the ground directly below it, which would be that. I'm going to put a little mark here. So those 3 points right there are points on my shadow. So then I'm going to just start looking at others. I'm going to say, what happens down in here? So if I take this pair of points right here and go from the blue to the reverse sun, and the point on the ground directly below it, which is there, to the direction, to the shadow vanishing point. That's that line right there. So it looks like my shadow kind of does something like that, but I'm not comfortable faking it from that, so I'm going to get more points. I'm going to take a point over here in the middle. Go from here to the river sun, and from the point on the ground directly below the casting edge to the shadow vanishing point until they meet, and that's right there. So the shadow's starting to come down this way. So maybe I'll do another one in here. This point. And this point. So the shadow looks like it's kind of coming in like this, which makes sense. This is where it's sitting on the ground. So the shadow is going to sort of disappear down in here. The lower, the higher the shadow, the sun is, the more this shadow would come around this way. The lower the sun is, the more, it's always going to be in shadow right there where it touches. But it could be that the shadow starts right there, or it could be that the shadow starts out here because the light is higher. Which makes me think that one's wrong, actually. But that's where it looks like it is. All right, I want some more out here. I want to know if this is going like this or is it going like this. So I'm going to take a point. A pair of points. And here's the point on the ground. And they meet right there. So maybe I'll do one more over here. This line here. Now that's weird. And then suddenly there's one over here. So I could check this one, but this one looks right. I think probably I should have done the 12-point method here. I think this probably goes out like this. Because if it did that, then this would be, remember how this didn't match up with this? Like maybe this whole disc has to come out here like this. The lozenge is less lozenge like here. That actually looks better. Anyway, I think this one is an aberration. I'm not going to use it. I'm going to take a point. I'm going to take the comparable point here on the red. See what I get. So there. There. This one here. Oh, now I'm getting something way over here. I'm going to just go over here. I'm not going to think about that anymore. So what it looks like is it looks like my shadow is going like this. I'm going to ignore that one. If I were more confident about what I've done here, I would maybe cast a few more points in here, but I'm not that confident about this blue line here. So the shadow goes something sort of like that, probably kind of something sort of like that, but we won't see that. And then we get out our compass. Kind of like when we did the reflections, it's sort of counterintuitive. You wait till you're all done to draw the sphere itself. So I'm going to use the center of the whole kit and caboodle right there. And then I'm going to do what I did when we were drawing reflections to draw the sphere. I'm going to find the biggest point. I'm going to use this as the origin point for my compass. And then I'm going to find the farthest point on the ellipse. And that ellipse that's in the orange plane. You can barely see it anymore. That's it right there. And if I go up here, I'm still between the touch point and the corner, which is also important. So there's the sphere, all that stuff in there. And then here's its shadow. Maybe this goes like this, I don't know. I should have done this more carefully. Anyway, I don't see it there because it's behind the sphere. And then once you cover, I don't want to cover all of those up because I want to scan this drawing and post it for you, but you know, once you've figured all of this out, then you can shade in your sphere and shade in your shadow, and they'll look more plausible. So this is kind of coming in here, curve coming in here, dying into this curve here. Okay. So that's the last shape. We've drawn all the shapes and we've cast all the shadows. You need to work on your composition and get everything sized and placed the way you want it. Remember, there's all the things from atmospheric perspective and from before the days of linear perspective. Placement on page, things that are bigger appear to us to be more at the bottom of the page. Things that are, we read things that are high on the page as far away, because that's where the grid is, far away, and things that are down here are bigger. So if you put a great big thing up here, that's going to fight with our brain. It's going to distract our brain from sort of clicking into the illusion. So you want to put your biggest shapes down in the front, because if you put a great big shape like this back there, then that would mean that this space is just, because see how tiny these squares have gotten? They've gotten really tiny, and they're only, this is like 4 squares this way. So 4 squares back there is only like that. So if you put a big thing back there, it does mean it's really huge. And so it's going to make it look kind of illogical. Placement on page. Down here is closer, up here is farther away. Actually, up here isn't even on the ground. Up here is farther away, down here is closer. Things that are overlapping tell us that there's depth. Things that have a sort of geometric shape, like if we can see a shape changing behind another shape, then we know it has more depth. So if you have the shadow of one thing cast on the shadow of another thing, I would recommend against casting the shadow of your sphere onto something else round. That'll be pretty hard to figure out. There's another factor. I can't remember what it is now, but I'll look back later and tell you. So work on your schedule, your shadows, and take note of how they guide your eye around the composition. The shadows are the thing, the lines of contrast along the edges. Like this is going to be an important line of contrast right here, because this is going to be dark and this is going to be lighter. This is going to be light. This is going to be darker because that's the ground. Oh, I know. One last thing is we have to talk about the highlight. So if I go from this corner through the middle, I'm in this plane that goes through the middle. If I go from this corner through the center of the whole sphere and circle and all that and cube until I hit, I should draw this a little bit more clearly. If I go from this point through this, which is basically at 45 degrees, it's like saying I'm at this corner and I'm going to draw a line through that point. That's a line that's perpendicular to the plane. Okay. So if the angle of light is this line, and we're just assuming it is, then the hottest point of the highlight is going to be there. Because over here, the distance between the light waves is getting bigger and bigger. But here they're the closest together. So the highlight is going to be centered right along that 45-degree line. So the 45-degree line through the middle of the center ellipse, that orange ellipse, gets us to there. So that's where your highlight is going to be the brightest. And then, and we'll talk about shadows, core shadows, and the sort of light logic of this in another demo. But anyhow, your highlight is going to be there. The most dense light is there. And then the light is going to fade completely evenly, basically to the equator of your sphere. So here's, this would be, yeah, this point right here is out here on the face of the cube. So that point right there is on the equator. And this point right here is on the equator. So you could draw a curve like that. And that's going to give you, light's going to fade from here constantly towards there. And then your core shadow is going to start there. It's going to, your brighter light is going to start fading here. It's going to be completely faded by the time you get to the equator. And that'll be your core shadow. And then you have a little tiny bit of reflected light back here, picking up the back of the circle. But we'll talk about that later. So good luck. It's a little weird, but it'll give you a good idea where the shadow is. Have fun with it.